we sound. All right. All right. So we've dodged a few technical bullets here. So I'm just going to kind of
Yep.
get right. Let's get right back on track.
Yeah.
Let's dive right into it. So I want to know, what is that little thing on the outside of my house that's the gray box that all the electricity goes into? What is that, Zach? Why is it important? And should I be scared?
Oh, you should not be scared of the box itself.
But it has wasps in it, dude.
It definitely like if you are allergic to wasps, that is probably one of the most dangerous places to be.
The wasps are probably more dangerous than the electricity.
But no, that box on the outside of your house, that's the main disconnect. That's where the power comes into your house.
Okay.
And if it is installed properly, it should be completely safe.
So what is that called? If you were an electrician and you told me to walk out there to that box, you would call it what?
Main disconnect.
It's a main disconnect.
Yes, that is the main disconnect to your house.
Okay.
It should, if you flip that breaker, it should kill power to your entire house.
Okay, you said breaker. What's a breaker?
All right. So
Show me what this box looks like in the inside of it if I've never opened it before and seen it, or if I have opened it, survived the swarm of wasps.
yeah.
What am I going to be looking at?
So there's several different types.
Okay.
But
Show me the most common.
so this right here, let's see. Yeah. So right here is going to be your most common disconnect. Let's see.
Okay.
All right.
All right, for you that aren't actually looking at the podcast on YouTube and you're just listening, what we're looking at is, it appears to be two gray boxes with a meter on it of some sort on one of them. I'm trying to describe it. This is, everybody's seen it on the outside of your house, has numbers, it ticks. This is basically how the power company knows how much electricity you're using, right? And this thing has they can come out and pull this. This meter closes the loop between your house and the main power line, correct?
Yeah. So you're supposed to have the meter there and your main disconnect, and you can kill the power by turning off the main disconnect. I would never suggest a homeowner pull their own meter.
Oh, I don't.
That is not never.
There's a gold ring around it here, and it's a lock. They actually protect these, so you can't do that.
Yeah. Thank you, Jeannie.
Sounds good. All right, cool. Thanks. Yeah, and then we have what appears to be what you're calling a main disconnect, which is another bigger gray box right next to it, and there appears to be some type of black cover over, I'm assuming, what is a breaker.
Yes.
Okay, what's a breaker, Zach?
All right. So
It's
there's
a circuit breaker.
I'm going to show you the simplest type here.
Okay.
They all pretty much work the same way. They just change in size and shape sometimes. But this right here is probably what you're going to see when you open a breaker box.
Okay. And this is most of the time on the outside of my house, but not always.
Yes.
Okay, so sometimes this could be located in the closet or in a different room or something of that nature, right?
You know, we're talking about main disconnects. Let me see if I can actually find us a main disconnect. Because it's definitely a little bit bigger. Let's see here.
Yeah, there it is, right there on the top. Right down, right there.
Yep,
Isn't that a
right.
picture?
This is it right here.
All right, for those of y'all that are actually watching, we're pulling up right here, and this is the most common that I've seen in every residential home, at least in this area. This is how it's normally going to look.
Yep, this image right here. And, you know, some of them will have just this breaker in it.
Some will have two.
Some will have two. Some will have several breakers below it. It really depends on how house is constructed.
I'm talking about your main disconnect on the top. Maybe one breaker, maybe two breakers. And then you're going to have individual breakers in the bottom down there that run sections of your house.
Yeah. Right? Now, if you have an older home, all right, and when I say older, built pre-1960s, it's very possible that you might still have a fused disconnect. And all that will be, it'll have a giant handle on the outside of it, and you pull that handle down.
Okay. Which would be common for areas in, let's say, older parts of North Little Rock, Little Rock. Most of your suburb places aren't going to have too many
this is
houses.
going to be in your historical districts typically.
Okay. All right.
places like that.
So okay, so now we found a main disconnect. Why is it important for me to know? So this is going to be located usually on the outside of our house. We've discovered this, right? It's going to be in this big gray panel box. This should have a cover over it that will come over it, right?
Yes.
Protect it from the weather.
Yes, it should.
Okay. So why do I need to know where the main disconnect is on my house?
The reason you need to know this is if there is an emergency of some kind, and
Okay.
you need to turn power off, and you don't know the exact breaker or
Okay.
the what the mechanism of the problem is, you just want to kill power to the whole house.
Okay.
All right, and this is the quickest and easiest way to kill power to the whole house.
Perfect. Everybody should know where this is. This is going to be located outside in the big gray box. And it's usually the breaker that sits up on top. So what are they doing with their finger there? So, okay, Zach, I found the main disconnect. I don't know what to do now.
Yeah. So you have the main breaker will have a switch on it, and this is all breakers. It's basically just a giant switch.
Okay. So I just push it one way or the other. There's an on or an off.
There's an on and the off. Usually toward the middle of the panel is on. So to the right is on, and to the left is off.
Okay.
Is the most of the time, 99% of the time.
Okay. So most of these circuit breakers will be labeled, but if it's not labeled, to the left is on.
Yeah. Or to the middle of the breaker
yeah.
box.
To the middle of the breaker box is on, depending on, and then on the outside would be off.
Yes.
Okay. So why do I have individual circuit breakers for my house? So the power comes in. What's happening to the power? It goes into this gray box, and then it gets divided up into sections of the house, right?
Yes, it does.
And it's all sections. Why do we have to divide our electricity in sections? Why don't I just have one circuit breaker for my entire house?
The reason you don't have one circuit breaker for your entire house is our devices aren't made to handle that much power.
Okay.
And circuit breakers are there to protect the wiring in the house.
Okay.
All right, and the devices like your outlets and things like that.
All right.
If you were to just run from your main breaker to an outlet and there's a problem, it's going to melt the outlet. It's going to melt the wire. The wires that you run in your house aren't rated for that kind of power. They're going to get hot.
But I thought there was, only 110 volts coming into my house.
Yeah, there is. It's really only about 110 to 120 volts coming in, but that's not really what you're worried about.
Okay.
You're more worried about the load, or what they call amps.
Okay.
And amps is what's going to heat up that wire or the devices.
Okay. And so what is the circuit breaker? How does the circuit breaker keep that from happening? What is its designed function? Because you hear all the time when people talk about electricity, hey, go check the circuit breaker. Did it trip a breaker, right? That's the most common thing you
Yes.
hear. Hey buddy, did it trip the breaker?
Yeah.
So what does that mean?
So what that means is that the breaker has been overloaded. Usually it does this by detecting heat.
Okay.
All right. And it has a couple ways of tripping, but that's not really, we don't really need to know all of that.
Okay.
But what it does is it protects that wire by protecting overcurrent through heat or other mechanisms.
So it shuts off.
It kills the circuit.
Okay.
If you put too much power through that breaker, it's going to turn the breaker off.
Okay. And so it's not only protecting the wires, protecting my house from potential overheating in a wire, therefore protecting me against fire, protecting my electronics that are plugged into that circuit, all that kind of stuff. So it's there for my protection.
Yes.
That and the system's protection, the system itself.
The system's protection as well, right? It's because if that breaker were to fail, it could mess up a bunch of other stuff, and it's going to cost you a bunch of money, right? And this is why, if you ever have a breaker trip, don't throw a bigger breaker in there. All right.
Okay.
All right.
That's a good tip. Here's the tips that we're getting at. Not that you need to be necessarily, we're going to get into replacing circuits and whether you should be doing it or not anyways. But if you are doing that and you keep getting a circuit breaker that keeps tripping, the problem probably isn't the size of the breaker. It's either the breaker itself or something in the system that keeps tripping it that needs to be replaced.
It may be overloaded, right?
Okay.
And a lot of people, I think, don't realize that the breaker there is, it's based on the wire size, not on what's plugged into it.
Perfect. That's good knowledge. So you can easily have too many kitchen appliances on a system that wasn't designed to have that, or
Mm-hmm.
now with everybody having charging devices, you
Yeah.
could have too many charging devices in an outlet or in a series of outlets in a room that was
Yep.
never designed when your house was built in 1990 to have that many things charging
Yeah.
off of
And-
it or pulling.
And a lot of times, what I would see, like the most common thing, people would replace an air conditioner or an oven or a water heater or something like that, and maybe the old thing that they had took way less power than what their new thing requires.
Gotcha.
Right? And they'll try to run that on the old breaker, and it trips it, and so they'll throw a bigger breaker on it. That is extremely dangerous.
Okay. That's once again we're going to get into that.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so talk to me about what the numbers mean on the actual circuit breakers themselves. I see a bunch
Yeah.
of numbers, Zach. What do they mean?
So there will be a number on the breaker handle. That's usually the amperage of the breaker. That's how many amps that breaker is rated to handle.
Okay.
So your main,
At any given time, at any one moment.
in
that's
any
what-
one moment,
okay.
it will handle that many. So like your typical main breaker is going to be anywhere from 100 amps to 200 amps. I've seen some 400 amp ones, but that's pretty rare unless you're just in a huge house.
So let me ask you this:
Mhm.
if I turned everything in my house, plugged everything in all at once, it's going to trip a breaker, right?
It shouldn't.
So that's how it's designed.
Yes.
Okay.
If your house is wired properly, all right, the way that it's meant to be wired, and bar you plugging in like a welder in your living room or something,
No, I mean just
Yeah.
the average stuff.
your
right?
average stuff, it should be able to run everything in your house at one time.
Okay. All right. So it's designed to run everything at once.
Mhm.
All right. So the numbers mean amps. Well, I mean, I don't want to get into the weeds of amperage because that's a physics class.
That-
So, no, I
Yeah,
completely. All right. I
Yeah.
get it. I understand. So we're gonna move on here. So now we've talked about kind of what the breaker panel is, and that is kind of what everybody's gonna call it. It's gonna be a breaker panel.
Mhm.
Each one of those circuit breakers are designed to control a certain amount of electricity in a certain portion of your house.
Mhm.
So if you all of a sudden lose electricity in a certain portion of your house, but you have electricity somewhere else, this is a good place, a good DIY place to
Yeah.
start.
And I don't know if this is something you want to touch on right now, but when it comes to breakers, there is a way to reset a breaker. You can't just turn it back on.
Okay.
So I don't know if you want to touch this now or later.
What do you mean reset a breaker?
Okay. So what you'll see, that breaker has an on and an off position, but when it trips,
It goes to the middle.
it goes to the middle.
Right.
And this may be hard to see on camera, but I have one here, right? And this one is in the middle position. Before you can reset this breaker, you have to turn it to the off position
Yeah. I've done that.
and then back on.
I've done that. Okay, that's important. Yes.
Yeah.
So that's actually really important. So show that again. So
Yeah.
basically, you're going to go out and you're going to find your circuit breaker is going to look like this. It's going to
Yes.
be more in the middle position. That means it is tripped.
Yeah.
In
And
which-
that's to indicate you that you have a problem.
Okay. Fantastic. So you've either put too much power on that load, or you have a
Short circuit.
a short circuit somewhere. It's heating up, so you have tripped the breakers somehow. Now, if it's in this middle position, you have to turn it to the off and then back to the on. Is that
Yep.
what you said?
You're going to turn it to the off and then back on.
So which is going to be usually so this is the middle of your panel, and so wait,
I can put it back in the
there. So it would be away
Mm-hmm.
and then back towards the middle.
Yep.
Okay. And that's how you would reset a breaker. Now let's talk about. I've gone out there and reset my breaker.
Mm-hmm.
Do I immediately need to call an electrician?
No.
Okay.
First off, electricians are expensive.
You would know.
Yeah. And so what you would really want to do is go out there, reset the breaker. If it immediately trips again,
Okay.
then I would start saying, let's call an electrician.
Okay.
Now, if you reset it and it holds for, an hour, 2 hours, and then trips again, I would start looking at what you got plugged in on that circuit.
Okay.
And I would start there.
Okay.
Make sure you're not overloading the circuit.
Okay. So that's the first place you want to start. If you trip a breaker, go out, reset it. If it immediately trips, call an electrician. If not, need to be looking at what you have plugged in. Maybe I'm running a brand new Keurig or coffee maker that I got, and I was cooking some bacon, making some coffee, had some biscuits in the oven, had all my lights on in my room, and I'm charging my cell phone. Once again, you said that these units were designed to handle most of the electricity, but I live in a house that was built in 1990.
Yeah.
And we have electronics now that pull way more power.
Yeah.
We're plugging more things into the wall that require more power.
One thing that you'll see a lot, and I see this all the time, is families, they got kids growing up, and now their two girls are running hair dryers in the bathroom at the same time.
Perfect example.
All right.
Yeah.
Or it's winter and you have space heaters plugged in. Those things are going to pull a lot of power, and that could be the cause of your issue.
Okay. Good to know. So we don't have to call an electrician right away. We've reset the breaker. Okay, so now the power comes into the house. Okay, it has come into this circuit breaker. It's controlled. It's divided up, nice and neatly packaged, and now it runs through wires into my house and into my rooms, and this is where it powers my stuff. Explain to me why when I pull off of an electrical socket or a light switch, why are there 3 wires? Why are there sometimes only 2?
Yeah. So almost any house built after probably the early 80s is going to have 3 wires.
Okay. Why 3?
You're going to have, and during that time, they had the addition of the ground into the house.
Okay.
All right.
I've heard a lot about ground wires. So it has to be grounded. Oh, hey, you won't die if you get shocked and you're not grounded.
Yeah, and the ground wire is literally tied to the ground.
Okay.
Like
that's why it's called a ground wire.
It's called a ground wire, and it is a safety wire, is what it is. So what happens is if you have a short circuit to the frame of something, like your washer or dryer, the frame gets
it gets electrified.
It gets electrified
when it's not supposed to be.
When it's not supposed to. Okay. The ground is going to receive that and tell the breaker to trip.
Okay. I won't get into the physics of that.
Yes.
That's just we'll just. So you're telling me the ground wire is designed to detect when something should not have electricity running through it. Did I hear that correctly?
Yes.
Okay.
Essentially, yes.
And so it tells me that it tells the system to shut power off.
Yes. Okay.
And it does this through physics. There's no magical computer in the background showing it. It's just physics, right?
No, and it's really not that complicated, but it's pretty hard to explain.
Okay. We don't have to get into the weeds today.
Yeah, but essentially, you want ground wires. It's a safety mechanism.
So tell me, for the average homeowner, why it's important.
So the reason this
and how to recognize it. Sorry, didn't mean to cut you off.
Yeah. So if you have an outlet, and if your house is newer, and it has 3 prongs on it.
Okay.
All right. The prong in the middle on the bottom is your ground prong. That's how you can know if you have a grounded outlet. And you're going to want, a lot of times you want to plug a lot of your sensitive equipment into it, like your TVs, your surge protectors. A lot of electronics are sensitive to like short circuits, and a ground can protect those.
Okay.
And so, like, it's pretty common for a house not to have grounds, and then we'll go in and add grounds to specific circuits throughout the house, because it can be very expensive to rewire a whole house.
Sure.
But yeah, so you want a ground. You always want to have that option.
How do I recognize the ground wire when I pull open my outlet, and I pull it out of the wall, and I get it all unscrewed, and I do all that, and on the sides there's 2 wires, one on one side, one on the other, and then the third is on the same side as one of the other wires. Out of those 3 wires, how do I know which one's the ground?
So the ground wire in a house is typically just going to be a bare copper wire.
Okay, there we go.
Right? That, like, when you look in your box, Sometimes it'll have a green wire nut on it.
Okay.
But typically it's going to be a green or bare copper wire. That's how you would know.
Okay. Perfect. Good information. So now, are there any times a house was built in 68, 78, okay, and somebody's come in and they've remodeled it, and this house originally had old 2-hole outlets in it, and now you've come back, remodeled it, and put a 3-prong outlet on it, and how am I supposed to know that that doesn't have a ground in it? Just by so you're what I'm asking is just having 3 holes on your outlet in the wall does not necessarily mean you've got a grounded system.
No, and they make testers for this, right? That you can plug in. They're not very expensive. They're about $15-$20, and you can plug it in, and it'll tell you if it has a ground wire. Now, one thing to be careful with is a lot of people try to trick those devices. All right, and you may not actually have a grounded outlet, even though it says you have a grounded outlet. And the only way to know that is to like actually open it up physically open it up and look. And I would like, and this is really more about buying houses.
Sure.
But if you're buying an older house and it has a bunch of grounded outlets in it, make sure your inspector opens up several of the outlets and actually looks.
Okay, so if you're having a good, and this is perfect information, so just make sure if you're buying a house that's a little bit older, been remodeled, that your home inspector, which they should be doing, opens up an actual outlet to make sure that it's a grounded system. Good stuff, man. All right, so we've kind of talked about what the ground wire means, basics of the 3 wires. Let's continue on with that. What are the other 2 wires mean?
So the other 2 wires are your hot and your neutral wire.
Okay. What does that mean?
So to complete a circuit, you have to have both of them. Think of the hot wire is coming to the outlet and the neutral wire
It's taking power away.
is taking power away.
Because that power's got to go somewhere, right? Okay.
And always, and then I'm going to say this now. If you have any question about electrical and you're messing with it, don't. All right.
Okay, so
just because a wire is not black does not mean it's not hot. Okay.
and they make testers for that, right?
They do make testers. There's plenty of meters and they make some sticks
and
that
beep 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 beep.
yeah,
beep, beep.
and it'll
I
tell
got
you
one
if
at
a
the
wire
house.
is hot.
Yeah, I got one at the house. Yeah, and they are very sensitive.
Yes.
Right. Okay. So, what you're saying is, don't play with matches.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Copy. So we've got how to identify. Tell me the tips and tricks of how to identify the neutral from the hot.
Yeah, so typically on it's really easy on newer houses because every wire coming in, you're gonna have a black and a white wire. A black or red or white wire. Sometimes you have a red wire, but the white wire should always be the neutral on an outlet.
And okay, it's the neutral. That's I could
attach to the silver screw.
Okay. If that circuit has power, I could grab the neutral and it's not going to kill me.
As long as it's connected to the circuit, yes.
So the neutral is not neutral. This is not a Switzerland wire. This some bitch could creep up and bite you in the butt.
This thing,
if you complete this, if you become the outlet, it will shock you.
It will shock you.
So there's constantly that neutral is constantly having. Well, now that doesn't make sense to me, Zach. I would have to be touching the hot wire too, right?
Maybe there. So this kind of gets in the weeds, but here's what I'll say. This make it when you think about electricity, you can kind of relate it to water. It's trying to find the quickest path to ground, right? It's trying to get back to its source. Okay? And if you have a hot wire connected and the neutral wire disconnected, that power's still trying to get back to the source. And so it can shock you.
Okay.
Yeah. So, and this is why I say, if you're working on electricity, kill the power.
And how do I do that?
You can do that from the main breaker.
Okay.
You can do that from a switch if it's a light fixture. You can do that from the other breakers. And you just got to make sure that you turn off the right thing.
Okay. So
Yeah.
that kind of gets me to my next point. So we've kind of. I'll just touch on this real quick. So if we're like you said, what he's talking about is the little breakers. If you don't necessarily you don't have to cut the power to the entire house to work on one outlet. You can just, if it's properly labeled, you know exactly which breaker that outlet covers. Getting you one of those little stick testers is a great way to kill the power to that circuit breaker. Go over to the outlet that you're about to work on, test it. If the thing doesn't beep, you're good to go. You're not going to get shocked.
Yeah.
But recap, black or red usually means the hot wire.
Yes.
That always has electricity in it. Zach educated me and said sometimes if the neutral is not connected, it can also have power to it too. So working on an outlet without cutting the power off is just dangerous.
Yes, it is.
1,000%.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're going to definitely, anytime we work on anything that's like an outlet or has power to it, we want to cut the breaker. That's the big thing, right?
Yes.
That's what you want to educate people. And that's how you do it. You go
you're going to always turn the power off.
Right. So what if I'm working on a ceiling fan? And can I just cut the light switch off?
Yeah, you can. Make sure to have your tester with you. A safe assumption is assume things are hot.
Right.
But make sure you're testing everything before you touch it. And if you have a multimeter, that's awesome. If you have one of those sticks, those work pretty good. But my suggestion is always going to be to turn the breaker off. Now, if you know that the power's off when you hit the switch, then yeah, it's safe.
So I've heard horror stories about people having two switches and not knowing that they have two switches.
Yes.
And they cut one switch off thinking that the power was off to the unit, and it's actually not.
Yeah, and that is
a good or poor example.
So that's called a three-way switch.
Okay.
And it's very common. And especially in older houses, your wiring colors, you can pretty much throw them out the window. The wires won't mean what you think they mean.
Okay.
Newer houses, this is where we get into that red wire a lot of times. This is where you're going to see it most of the time is in your switches and 220 devices. But if you see it on a switch, that means you have a three-way switch. And I would always kill the breaker to that.
Yeah.
Like, just assume that it's going to be hot because there is hot wires going through there at all times.
So the main takeaway from this, folks, is if you are working on anything that has electricity to it, kill the circuit.
Yes, kill the circuit.
At the circuit breaker, the panel, which is usually located outside. We discussed this already.
Yeah,
so
or in a garage.
Or or in a garage. It depends, yeah. Okay, so we've talked about the three wires that I'm going to find if I try to work on something. So tell me, what are some of the things that you recommend I can do in your years of doing service? We were talking off here before we came on. There were some stories that you had that you got called out to some places that people could have done that on their own. Explain some of these things that you as an electrician would feel comfortable with an average guy who doesn't know much doing around the house with electricity.
I will tell you the most common thing first. And this happens when your outside outlets quit working, or your bathroom outlets quit working, or kitchen outlets quit working. All right.
Okay.
Most of the time, this is a GFI outlet that has been triggered.
Okay, what does GFI mean?
So GFI is a ground fault circuit interrupter. And what this does is it's more sensitive than a breaker.
What does that look like? Let's show the people what that looks like.
Let's see here.
So you added a letter into that. So is it technically GFCI?
Yes.
Or is that just a new term? Or
It's always
did it used to be just a GFI?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, people have just always called it a GFI. Did I not save that search? Oh, here it is. Yeah. So let's see here.
There are 2 or 3 types.
Yeah, there's several different types. It's you're gonna see something kind of like this.
Okay.
Or
I've seen that one for sure.
Yeah, you can see this is going to be the general idea of what a GFI is going to look like. And you're going to have a red button and a black button.
Okay. Or just two whites. There are some, but they will
Or
say
two
something.
whites, yeah.
They'll say something on them. What do they say?
Test and reset.
Okay.
And what's going to happen is a lot of them now are self-testing, so you don't have to test them. But you really want to test these about once a month to make sure that they're still operational.
Okay.
And what these are typically going to be used in wet locations.
Okay.
All right. And they can detect the smallest amount of voltage leakage. I guess that's the best way to put it.
Okay.
All right.
Without getting into the weeds.
Without getting into the weeds,
I got you.
if this thing detects that it's losing power somewhere, it's going to trip. And a lot of times people won't think about these outlets because houses, especially built in the early 2000s and like early or late 90s and things like that, they would use one outlet to protect a bunch of outlets. So you can wire these with one outlet and protect 8 outlets downstream.
Okay.
And what people will find is that they're usually hidden behind the refrigerator in their garage, or they're hidden in a like a laundry room in the garage or something like that. And typically they'll wire all the outside outlets into the garage. And you can find that and reset it. You see this a lot around Christmas when people are putting out their Christmas lights and things like that.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And it's a real simple fix. I've been called hundreds of times to outlets not working, and it's just a trip to GFI. And
so why do I have a GFCI outlet when I have a circuit breaker?
So a circuit breaker is not going to trip if your extension cord is in a puddle of water.
Okay.
It just won't. And that's why we have GFI outlets. Because if you think about the breaker, the GFI is like the scalpel of the breaker. Like it's finding the smallest amounts of issues and tripping at that point.
So how many GFCIs do I need to have in my home? Do I need to have one per circuit breaker? One per
anywhere
unit?
You have a wet location. The rule is
only water. Why,
yeah.
Okay, so these really are only good for around water?
That's where they're the most useful.
Huh.
Usually you'll find them on kitchen counters.
Yeah.
Bathroom counters, outside outlets, and garages. So the rule is anything within 6 feet of water needs to be a GFI outlet.
Okay. And why is that important? Why do I need something to protect me from an extension cord being in water?
It's to protect the person walking through the yard in their bare feet in the rain. It's going to protect anyone from getting electrocuted from moisture in the area.
So people that are in a home and they get 2 feet of water in their house, and are they going to get electrocuted?
Probably not. No.
Then why do I need a GFCI?
Because the state has required it.
You heard it here, folks. The tough questions.
Yeah. No, it definitely has some uses. And I would say that if you use common sense, most of the time you won't need a GFI. But this is more of a device that makes our lives idiot-proof.
Okay.
If that makes any more sense.
That makes every sense.
Yeah.
To me, that makes every bit of sense. Anything that keeps people from being fucking stupid.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because we are.
Yeah.
All right. Cool.
And I'll tell you a story that I've had.
Sure.
All
Let me
right.
hear it.
So I got called to a lady's house who said that every time she was stepping into her hot tub, it would tingle.
Oh, really? Not in a good way, I'm assuming.
Yeah. And I got to looking around, and the person who installed their hot tub didn't put a GFI outlet on the hot tub, or a GFI breaker on the hot tub.
So this wasn't a hardwired hot tub. It just
it was hardwired. On a hot tub, you're going to have a GFI breaker most of the time, right? And they just put a regular breaker in there. Well, there was a wire that rubbed through on a pipe in the hot tub and electrified the water. All right.
Okay.
And when she stuck her foot in the water and her foot was on the ground outside the water, she could feel the tingling. But when she got all the way in, she wouldn't feel it anymore because she wasn't grounded.
This lady was just trying to.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. Anyway.
All right. And this is why we have GFI outlets. It's things like this, because a lot of times you won't notice there's a problem when electricity is going into water because it won't trip a breaker.
Because breakers, yeah, okay, that makes sense. Okay, perfect. So, what are some of the things that I can do myself? You talked about GFCI. So you talked about usually if there's an outlet that goes out, all of a sudden 2 or 3 outlets in my house don't work. That tends to be
a GFI outlet, and you want to reset it.
Just reset it, and should fix the problem. If not, that's time to probably call. If you have multiple outlets go out,
I would say even if you have multiple outlets go out, look for a GFI first. If it's outside outlets or bathroom outlets or
anything
kitchen
but
outlets,
water.
Yeah.
Okay. It probably tripped.
Yeah. Check the GFI outlets first.
And then check the main breaker. Make sure that you don't have a circuit breaker there tripped.
Yep.
And if it's not your GFCI that needs to be reset, and it's not a tripped breaker, and I have 3 outlets go out, time to call an electrician.
Yeah. And this, even if you have a bunch of outlets go out, and this is, these steps right here will save you money most of the time.
Okay.
All right. Let's say you have something go out in your house. All right. Start with the simple stuff first. Check the breaker. Check for GFIs. Check the device that's plugged in. Make sure it's not broken.
Okay. So try to plug it in somewhere else.
Yeah. Try to plug it in somewhere else. And if that doesn't fix your problem, then it's time to start looking for an electrician.
Okay. So the easy stuff first. Makes sense, right? It's everything in life. Okay. What are some of the other things I could do by myself?
Man, changing outlets.
Okay.
And I will say this, if you are not comfortable with this, don't do it.
Okay.
Kill the power always. But changing your own outlets and switches isn't that difficult.
Or daunting, correct?
Or daunting, yeah.
Do you have one?
So I have a couple of things here. And there's actually one thing I want to talk about on this in particular. So I have 3 devices here. Let me go back to... Yeah, so like, I got your regular switch here, right? And then on your GFIs, this is... Got one here. If you are installing your own GFI, okay, and this is a common thing I've seen where people who try to fix their own things and they can't get it fixed, right? Something's not working properly. You'll install this, the light on it will light up, but it won't reset.
Okay.
All right. If you look on the back of the outlet, there's a line and a load side.
Okay.
All right. If you have to wire it into the line side for it to work. The load side is power going out to other devices.
Oh, perfect.
And so
it's if I want to daisy chain or protect other devices downstream, as you called it earlier.
Yeah, you would tie those into the load side.
Okay.
But I see a lot where people will just wire into the load side.
Looks like it's going to work.
It looks like it's going to work. You think it's going to work, and it's not. And people are really baffled by it.
Sure.
Look on the back of the device, and it will say line on one side of it.
Let me see what we got here. Yeah, it's very small. Okay. Yeah, it's super easy to see. On the back of the... Very obvious. It says line, points to exactly where that is. So we're replacing a GFCI, and I want to always wire this device, what's powering this outlet, to the line side.
Yes.
Okay.
That will be the power going in.
Yeah. All right, folks. And the 2 buttons on the middle here that you probably can't see very well are very well represented. You could have it either way. It is designed to be read, test, and reset, whether no matter which orientation, whether it's this way or this way, they can both be read. red, super easy.
And I'll tell you, sometimes to reset them, you might want to grab a pencil or something so you can push all the way in.
Okay, yeah, because your fingers can't always get all the
Yeah,
way in.
if you
on
got
something.
some real sausage fingers like myself, it's really hard
To-
to push it all the way in sometimes.
So let's talk about when you are wiring something up.
Mm-hmm.
Now, whether it's an outlet or a switch,
Mm-hmm.
I have a bunch of screws. Zach, what are those for?
Those are for your wires
Okay.
to land. And this is one thing I see a lot. So we can use the switch as an example for this. On the back of the outlet, you'll see some holes in the back of it.
Okay.
Those are designed to stab the wires in. Don't use those.
Okay.
All right. They will work, but over time they'll back out.
Okay.
It's just, I can't tell you how many houses I've been to, and 5 years after the switch is installed, the wires have literally backed themselves all the way out. You want to put your wire under the screw. And one thing, sorry, I'm gonna give an example here real quick. All right, so you want to put a curl on your wire, all right, to go around the screw, and put the wire onto the screw clockwise, so that when you tighten down the screw, it pulls the wire closed.
Okay.
All right. When you put it on the other way, what it does is it tries to open up that wire,
Okay.
and you'll get a bad connection.
You did a fancy little trick there with these fancy little pliers here.
Yeah.
So you just took your wire and see if I can just bend it back. So you just went to the top. Oh, you can't bend it back. So
You can. Yeah, you can. You just got to find the right spot. There you go.
Okay, kind of.
Mm-hmm.
I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
Wow. So y'all, it's kind of hard to see, but
Yeah.
Anyway, so what he was saying is make your loop in your wire here.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And when you're putting it on your outlet, you want the loop to go like that, correct?
Yep. Clockwise.
What do you mean by how do I know it's clockwise? That looks clockwise.
So righty tighty, lefty loosey.
No, I mean, I
yeah,
get that.
you want to
I get that, but this looks
Here you go.
clockwise as well.
right. So what you're going to want to do is like on this right here, we're going to be spinning the screw clockwise, right? So we want the end of the wire down,
Okay.
right?
Okay. That's what you mean by clockwise, is the end of the wire down.
Yep.
Okay. And so then I would take this, tighten this screw up, and get it nice and snug. And then I have power to the...
Yeah.
Well, this wire's connected.
That wire's connected at that point.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so then you, on this switch,
Mm-hmm.
you have another big screw.
Yep.
So then you have a green.
Mm-hmm.
We talked about this earlier.
Yep. That's your ground.
So one is going to be my power. One is going to be my neutral.
Nope. Not on a switch. There's no neutral on a switch.
So what's this other one?
That is the wire. So you'll have power coming from your source, from the panel, and then power leaving to go to the light fixture or the thing that you're switching.
So I have no neutral. I have two powers. Okay, so I should have two blacks.
Yep.
No white.
No white.
And then a green.
Yep.
Or a bare copper wire indicating that it's my neutral.
Yes.
Okay. Only on outlets am I going to have one black.
And one white.
Does it matter which side I put them on?
Yes, it does. So if you look on an outlet, there will be a copper screw and a silver screw.
Okay.
The copper screw is going to be your hot wire. The silver screw is going to be your neutral wire.
Sure as shit. They have a copper and a silver. Okay. Silver's neutral.
Mm-hmm.
Copper is hot.
Mm-hmm.
What if I do it backwards?
It will probably work depending on what you plug into it.
Okay.
But it's dangerous for anyone who has to work on it.
Okay.
And some devices are sensitive to which way is which.
Okay.
And
Because I'm pretty sure I have changed some outlets in my house, and
That
I
will-
don't know if I did that.
yeah.
I'm being dead serious. So, all right. Well,
Yeah.
that was, see, I told you I'd learned something today.
Yeah, and you'll like you're just a regular light bulb or something like that is not going to be affected by which one's the hot and which one's the neutral.
Okay.
It's really going to be anything with like a motor on it or things like that. Because like if a motor is made where it can spin backwards. If you wire it backwards, it will spin backwards.
Makes sense. Yeah.
And so,
Okay.
mhm.
So we've talked a little bit about, and this is all just super brief, right? We can dive more into this, but changing outlets, people, it's really not that hard. Like he said, electricity is kind of the way that I look at it is it's kind of like guns. They aren't as scary as everybody makes it out to be. And as long as you show them respect and do your due diligence as far as educating yourself on how it works,
Yeah.
it's not that scary.
Well, and I understand the fear behind electricity because an error can be very dangerous.
It can be fatal.
Yeah. Right. But if it's done right, it's completely harmless. Like, there's not a whole lot of middle ground with electricity. And so this is one of those deals. Always make sure that the power is off.
Numero uno, most important thing.
And
check.
If you're uncomfortable, don't do it.
Yeah, no, I mean,
Yeah.
you've covered that. And you've said that, hey, and that's really good advice. And call the professional, let them come out and work on it. There's absolutely zero shame in it. And you've seen some things, and a good electrician is going to come in. They're going to do the work, and they're going to say, hey, or before they do the work, hey, this is actually a super simple fix.
Yeah.
I just noticed this was your circuit breaker. I pushed it. Hey,
yeah,
this is something that you can do. This is where it's at. You educate these people and you move on. Now,
Yeah, and
now, if it was on a Saturday at 2:00, I mean, you have to charge for your time. I don't want to get into what electricians should be charging. But a good electrician, if it's something simple and an easy fix, they're going to educate you and let you know.
And I'll tell you a common practice with electricians, and I see it all the time. And I don't know that I disagree with it, but it is something that costs people money. If you call an electrician and it's just a GFI tripped, okay, a lot of electricians will replace this device so you don't feel like an idiot. Right? They don't want the customer to feel bad. Right? And it may cost the customer an extra $10. Right?
Well, they don't. I mean, as an electrician, if it's tripped and you reset it, you can't guarantee me that thing's not broken.
That's true. You can't. But
I'm out here. I'm going to charge you, so I want you to feel like you're getting your money's worth. I'm going to go ahead and say, oh, yeah, you probably have a bad GFCI. I'm going to go ahead and replace it for you.
Yeah.
Charge you the $100 for coming out because that's what an hour of my time costs. And I don't care if I'm there 20 minutes, you're getting charged an hour.
Exactly. There is an hour minimum on every service call.
And this thing, I'm going to charge you $15. So it's a $115 check for 15 minutes worth of work, which you could have just hit the reset button.
Yeah.
This is why I'm having this podcast. This is why I wanted to talk about this.
Yeah.
I don't want everybody to have to pay $115 when it is something that they
can put some
themselves.
people in a bad spot.
Yeah, and so I mean, this is really going out. I mean, to some people that are paycheck to paycheck, you know, and $115 from an electrician could completely set you back for 2-3 weeks, maybe even a month.
Yeah.
So just learning some of these quick tips and things that you need to be, and if you own your home, absolutely, these are things you need to know. Now, if you rent, immediately call your landlord.
Yeah,
this
if
is
you're
what they
renting,
have. If you're
do
renting,
not work on that rent
don't
house.
touch your rent house. This is what you pay extra in rent for.
Yeah.
Is to have maintenance come out and do these things for you. But if you're a homeowner, just be able to recognize what a GFCI is, how to reset it, how to test it, what they're used for. They should be in wet areas. You should have some wet areas. We discussed that.
Yep.
What about ceiling fans, Zach? Can I change my own ceiling fan, or do I need to be, as an average Joe, can an average Joe do it, or do I need to have a little bit of technical skills in changing a ceiling fan or a light fixture?
You need a little bit of technical skills. Okay. And this is what I'll say. I probably say that most people out there could change their own ceiling fan.
Perfect.
All right. But this is where you get into the issue of you hire an electrician to come change a ceiling fan. It takes him 30 minutes. It may take you 3 hours if you've never done it before.
That's true.
You're probably going to install something wrong and have to take it down and redo it. And
I know this from experience.
yeah.
I've done that.
But if you can do it, it's
Sure.
a good thing to know.
An experience.
And it's worth knowing.
Absolutely.
And I think most people can change a ceiling fan. Make sure you're comfortable on a ladder, and I would always have an extra person there to help you.
So this is kind of a point that I wanted to hit on.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not one of those guys that's going to shame other people for not wanting to do handiwork. If it's just not something that you want to do, then so be it. And you have the disposable income to pay somebody to come out and do it for you. You work hard, your disposable income, go for it, knock yourself out, right?
Yeah.
Have the professional do it. You are at an increased risk of being taken advantage of.
Yeah.
I absolutely believe that. Especially if you don't take the time to educate yourself to know what you're talking about, you can be scammed very easily.
And there's a lot of bad contractors out there.
Oh well, that are taking advantage of people, for sure, for sure.
Know, and
like you're saying, bad in the sense that they don't know what they're doing.
They don't know what they're doing, and a lot of times they'll overcharge.
Sure.
Like I've had run-ins, and I don't know that I want to say who it is, but they are a big chain of electrician service people.
We won't bash anybody on the podcast, but okay, big chain.
They charge outrageous prices, and they target middle to low income people. And if you're looking for an electrician, ask around, vet your contractors, because it can be something that you get taken advantage of. You may end up spending $1,000 when you only needed to spend $200.
Multiple quotes.
Yeah, get multiple quotes. Ask multiple people to come look at it.
Yeah, most of the time that stuff's free.
Yeah, and if a contractor gets mad at you for getting quotes,
not a good contractor.
Don't use them.
It's not a good contractor. 1,000%.
Mm-hmm.
I agree with that wholeheartedly. But just understand that if you're cutting the power, there's not much you can really, as far as the small stuff that we discussed, changing a switch, changing an outlet, changing a light fixture, a ceiling fan. And there's not much that you can mess up, and it's great experience.
It is. And a real easy tip, all right, if you've never really done a lot of this, take a picture of the outlet or the fan wiring before you disconnect it.
Absolutely do that all the time. 1,000%. We have cameras on our phone now. Look at how it was wired. Take the picture before.
Yep.
And just refer back to it. It makes it so I do this in everything before I break it down and take it apart.
Because you won't remember.
No,
trust me.
No. Once you dive into it, I agree. And hey, this is just me personally. I use YouTube a lot.
Yeah.
I really do. I think it's a great source of information. You can pretty much find anybody on there that knows, how to do something small. I wouldn't necessarily go there for huge projects. For something small like this, you can always refer back to YouTube. Okay, so we've covered some of the things that we said that we would, that you're cool with. It's like an electrician, you're cool. Like, these are the things you need to know as a homeowner. You can do these yourself. Check this. What are some of the situations that I need to call an electrician, or you have a couple stories of where people should have called an electrician and didn't?
So one common thing that I've seen, and I'll tell you a story. This was amazing. A lot of houses built in the late 60s, early 70s were wired with aluminum wire, like in the walls. All right.
Okay.
It was cheaper. The wars were using a lot of copper, but aluminum doesn't play well with other wires, other materials. It corrodes. It's also brittle. It'll eventually break. And so one thing to keep in mind. So I'm going to tell you the story first. So I'm at a house and they're asking, do they need to rewire the house? They want a quote. They don't know if they want to. They have aluminum wire in the house. And I'm talking to the lady, okay? And she has a lamp plugged into the wall. And while I'm there talking to the lady, suggesting to rewire the house, the outlet caught on fire.
While you're there as an electrician.
While I'm there as an electrician.
Okay. Yeah.
And there are some simple fixes to that things. These are things that you need to be aware of, right? there's a lot of people out there with this wiring. You need to be aware of it. You need to hire an electrician to come in, make sure all the screws are tight, make sure you don't have metals mixing, things like that.
How do I know if I have aluminum wiring in my house?
If you pull out an outlet or a switch, you can see it'll be a white metal material versus a copper colored.
So I have to expose the wire.
Yeah, like I would most likely that is going to be told to you on the front end when you purchase the house.
Okay.
It's going to be disclosed to you.
Is that mandatory?
I think it should be.
Right. You
But
just don't know
if you hire, like every house, you'll hire a home inspection.
Sure.
And they should tell
catch
you.
that. Okay.
They should catch that.
Okay.
That is probably one of the biggest things to me is.
Are you recommending? Do you recommend that if I haven't had any problems with my aluminum wiring, should I rewire my whole house?
If you find out that you have aluminum wire in your house, start budgeting to rewire your house.
Because it's coming eventually.
It's coming eventually.
Okay.
Like that would be my suggestion.
Sure.
It may make it 20 more years, but it's hard to tell.
Okay.
But yeah, that's one of the bigger ones. And then just people buying older homes, know what you have, know what's in your house, and hire good contractors to fix the things that you need fixed and get it done right the first time. Don't patch mill it.
Okay. So what about all great advice, by the way. What about if I wanted to? What if I wanted to run new wire? So let's say that I wanted to take wires from that outlet and run them through and make a new outlet on the other side of the wall. Is that something I can do?
I would not suggest someone who doesn't have experience do that.
Okay.
For multiple reasons.
Sure.
If you don't know what's in that wall, you could hit a water line. You could hit other electrical wires. And it takes some pretty expensive tools to do that properly.
Okay. So no running new wire by yourself. That's something that you absolutely want to call an electrician for, right? You want to call an electrician if you're going to be adding anything new lighting, anything like that, where I have to
if you're replacing something existing, I would say that 90% of the time the homeowner can probably do it.
Okay. That's good advice. Good advice. Well, do you have anything else that you want to add from this pretty quick broadcast session?
Yeah. So one quick thing I've seen a lot.
Okay.
And this is people will install LED lights in their house, and
okay. What do you mean LED lights?
Like they'll replace their light bulb and put in an LED light bulb.
Okay, so light bulbs.
Just light bulbs, right?
Okay.
And those lights will start flickering.
Okay.
Things like that. What that is,
I have experienced this.
Most of the time, this is because that light is on a dimmer, and it is not a dimmer rated light bulb.
I have no dimmers in my house. So the flickering you're saying is due to a dimmer. What's a dimmer? It's where you can adjust the brightness of a light bulb based on the power level.
Yeah,
right?
adjust the brightness level of the light.
Okay.
I got one right here. It usually has a little slide on the side you can raise and lower.
The old school ones.
Yeah,
have
you
a knob.
have a knob.
You pushed in to turn on and off, and then the knob adjusted it. Right.
Exactly.
Those are the old school.
They still make them.
Oh, do they really?
Yeah, they still make them.
Okay. So why is it that when I buy an LED bulb and it says that it's supposed to last 15 years, I get 3 years of use out of it? Is that just because it's a crappy LED bulb?
It could
or does
be.
it have something to do with my electrical system?
So a lot of places have dirty power. All right.
I have a feeling this is a conversation that you cannot wrap up in 5 minutes.
Well, it's probably not.
What is dirty power? Come on,
so,
man. Like how is it dirty?
Okay, so a lot of people think that when you buy a surge protector or like a big surge protector out there on the side of your house that you're protecting against lightning. You're not. You're protecting against dirty power.
So you can't. All right, let's set the story straight. There
Yeah.
is not a surge protector in the world that's ever going to protect your electronics from lightning, correct?
Yeah, no, like
Okay,
it's
that's what I thought.
lightning. All bets are off. I don't really care what you do. There's nothing predictable about.
The only
about
way to
lightning.
protect your electronic from lightning is to unplug it.
Yeah, but like particularly in Arkansas where we're at,
Of course.
you can get a lot of
Dirty
voltage
power.
spikes. All right, or if you're on the end of a line,
Is that what you're calling dirty power? Is voltage spikes?
voltage spikes and voltage drops. Right?
Okay. All right. I thought you meant like it was corrupted in some sense.
No,
like
no.
My electrons aren't as
You-
good as yours.
You don't have a consistent 120 volt coming to your house, right?
Okay. All right. So it's dirty power.
Yeah, and
That's
so
dirty, okay.
anytime you have a power surge, that's really going to affect your LEDs. All right, those things are very susceptible to large voltage changes.
Okay. So that's probably a good explanation then.
The other thing is they also just make a lot of cheap LEDs.
That's also a good point. They probably are like great value brand because the LEDs are expensive.
Yeah,
But they're supposed to last 30 years. Well,
Yeah.
they don't. And that's the problem is I miss my incandescent bulbs every now and then.
every now and then. I will say though, the power consumption difference is huge.
No, it does make a big difference. I agree. And if everybody goes to, I mean, they don't even sell incandescent bulbs anymore. As
They
far
have
as
a
I know.
few. They have specially designed
Special types.
like heat
right?
lamps and
Yeah.
like different things like that.
All right. Anything else?
No, I don't think so.
Man, dude, I enjoyed. This was a lot of fun. This
Yeah.
was something that we can always come back and touch on and get a little bit more in depth.
Yeah, and I love sharing my knowledge on this stuff.
Yeah, no, it's great.
I've spent a long time learning and figuring out new stuff about this stuff, and it's mesmerizing to me. And I know I have a hard time not getting into the weeds
Well,
when it comes to a lot of it.
Sure. You're knowledgeable about it, and you want to nerd out about it, and you have the right to be able to do that. And we just, and it is my job to kind of keep you, on task and out of the weeds, so the average person can understand what's going on. But this was good stuff.
Yeah.
I really appreciate it, and appreciate everybody out there listening. Our next podcast will be coming up in the next week or so. We're going to try to stay on schedule.
Yeah.
Hey, and you just never know what we're going to talk about.
We've run the gambit so far.
So far, we're working on it. We may come back. We may circle back to doing a little bit more entertainment. I know I really enjoyed that episode. I think some of y'all did out there too.
Yeah. I'm in the process of binge watching a show that we can talk about.
Perfect. I told you that was going to be a good one. Cliffhanger. So we may touch on that. I introduced Zach to a hidden show that's on Hulu that I bet you've never
Actually
watched.
not on Hulu anymore.
Oh, is it not? What
No.
did it move to? Amazon Prime?
I had to purchase the first season.
You had to purchase it.
Yeah.
Hulu dropped it. I
Hulu
didn't know
dropped
you
it.
had to purchase
Yeah.
it.
It was only like $9
Okay.
for the first season.
This
So
is-
it's like it's not like a
I know, but still, that's sad. I got to watch it for free. Anyways, this is probably one of the most underrated shows in the last 5 or 10 years, in my opinion. And when you get through with it, we'll sit here and talk about it.
And we also have a director that we need to talk about.
We do want to talk about a certain director that has. We'll see how you feel. Has he may or may not lost his touch, or did he ever have a touch?
That is the question.
All right, guys. Well, we appreciate you listening
Yeah.
today. This has been the Not Okay podcast. We've bitten off another big old piece of the dog bone.
Yep.
Hope y'all had a good time. I know